Come on in, everyone. So we're in a different place. It already messed up some of our seating arrangements, but we are glad that you're here tonight. Yeah, I think they will, but you see, I can move back. When did y'all get home?
Monday night, about 9 o'clock.
About what? Okay.
We didn't leave there till 3:40.
We were a little worried. We were concerned for you, and Dwayne too, because the Simmons came back about the same time. He said he got into a hailstorm. That,
We didn't get it.
huh?
We didn't get it.
Good for you. So yeah.
We had some fun Friday night, Saturday morning. The tornado warning
Ooh.
siren went off, and we were 2 minutes away from going to the cellar.
I was going to ask, did you go in the?
We did. We were looking. Everybody was up there. 258, and the guy on the TV said, "Well, the Pacific Fire is funny. You're not going to know it."
That's good. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. Maybe we're not. Cindy won't believe that my mouth is not loud enough to get us quiet. But it is. I could. I'm trying to be gentle. If you have your Bibles, turn over to John 4. We're going to be in the end of it, and in John 5 tonight. We're glad that each one of you are here. I'm happy that at least some of us read the email, or did you go over looking for it over there? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, even though the email or the text that I got was in two parts. Yeah, okay. But then I had to think, where is room 106? Aaron, would you lead us in prayer tonight?
I will.
Okay.
God, we are thankful for the opportunity that you've granted each one of us to be here this evening. Father, I ask that you bless our time together. I ask that you give Larry your words. Father, open our ears to hear what you would have to say. And Father, help us to learn some more about Jesus and the things that he did through the Gospel of John so that we can do as Jesus did. Thank you for Jesus and all the blessings that you've provided to us through him. It's in his name that I pray. Amen.
Now, if you were with us the last couple weeks, you know that I talked about two pairs of people who could not be any more different. Nicodemus and then a Samaritan woman. So let's just in our minds review about it. What kind of person was Nicodemus? He was Pharisee. Anyone else got another part? He was a spiritual leader. In fact, what was he called? Do you remember? Teacher of Israel and a ruler. Okay, anything else about him? He came at night. He was curious. Did he change right away? No, in fact, his journey probably takes 3 years. Now, what about the Samaritan woman? What kind of person was she?
The opposite of all that.
The opposite of all that. How so?
Not Jewish.
Even though I like the answer. Not Jewish. Well, kind of. Half-breed. She's a Samaritan. What else? Huh?
She was the outcast of an outcast.
Okay, she was an outcast of an outcast. And in fact, she thought of all kinds of reasons Jesus would not accept her. What else about her?
Many husbands.
Many. How many? 5. And what was her present situation?
Not married to the guy she was.
Yeah, not married. And we talked about how that could have been societal. It could have been just a number of things that could. How did Jesus? So let's review how Jesus treated both of them. How did Jesus treat Nicodemus? I know you've slept since then, but this is an open book test, so you can go back and look. How did Jesus treat Nicodemus? Better. Why so? Well, one, he was a Pharisee, which I did talk about how they were not, they sometimes get a bad rap. They really were serious, desiring to follow God, but what was wrong with the way they followed God? Now you can tell us. Okay.
I think it's Jesus met each one of them where they were,
Okay.
different aspects of their life.
How so?
Well, I mean, there's, with Nicodemus, I mean, he obviously was a studied person of the
Mhm.
law, and Jesus probably talked to him in ways that he would understand, and then the Samaritan woman was just, I mean, she was just searching, she was down and out, just searching, and very passionate probably, the way he talked to her. I mean, he got to the point, but I mean,
Why do you think it took so long for Nicodemus to fully embrace Jesus and for her so quickly?
He had more to lose.
He had more to lose. Okay, I think that's a good answer.
He probably thought in many respects he had already arrived. And she knew she hadn't.
Okay. I think maybe he thought he just needed a little, find one more key to getting it right.
He comes to Jesus thinking he knows what Jesus is.
Yeah.
He thinks he knows what he is, but then the conversation shifts that perception, and Nicodemus has a hard time perceiving and grasping that.
And I got to be honest.
He has no idea who this guy is,
Yeah.
or what he's doing, or he's acting completely out of frame. He should not be here. He should not be with her, and so she doesn't know what to do with him at all. And then when he starts to kind of move her a particular way, then she frames him as a religious man.
Okay.
He tries to do that, but that breaks too. And so finally, he becomes the person who told me everything I am.
Okay. And how did it end up?
Great evangelist.
Yeah, at the end, she becomes one who reaches out into an entire town.
And he, later, becomes
One who he's a follower who takes on the crucified body of Jesus. Both stories end, but they have to go through their story. So I've talked about in past weeks, and I do think John has stories together. There's a big picture going on, but there are some stories together. Tonight I want to look at 2 stories that we're not as familiar with. One is in John 4 at the end of the chapter, and then one is in John 5. The one who is in John 4 is what happens next. When he leaves Samaria, do you remember where he was going? He's going from Judea to Samaria, through Samaria to Galilee. Well, he goes to Galilee, and this is the next encounter. So, can I have a reader tonight? Okay, go ahead. And speak up, as you know.
from where to where.
I want you to read 4:46 to 54. Well, let's actually start in 43 to the end of the chapter.
When the 2 days were over, he went from that place to Galilee. For Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in the prophet's own country. When he came to Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, since they had seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the festival. For they too had gone to the festival. Then he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had changed water into wine, for those who forgot. Now there was a royal official whose son lay ill in Capernaum. When he had heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went and begged him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. And then Jesus said to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." And the official said to him, "Sir, come down before my little boy dies." Jesus said to him, "Go, your son will live." The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and started on his way. As he was going down, his slaves met him and told him that his child was alive. So he asked them the hour when he began to recover, and they said to him, "Yesterday at 1 p.m, the fever left him." The father realized that this was the hour when Jesus had said to him, "Your son will live." So he himself believed along with his whole household. Now this was the second sign that Jesus did after coming from Judea.
Okay. Let's talk about this guy. What do you notice about this guy? And what gets him connected to Jesus? Go ahead. You can tell me.
Royal official.
He's a royal official, which is strange in and of itself. What gets him to Jesus? His son's sick and is at the point of death. This guy is at a place of desperation in his life. And he comes to Jesus wanting him to do something. Now, if you were... Are we missing something?
Sorry, no, I was messing with the air conditioner.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
You don't want to get, we're not.
Well, I am sweating, but that's okay.
We're not going to do the genealogy sermon.
Okay, don't, yeah. Thank you. I don't know that it's even come on tonight, but that's okay. I can just sweat and we'll keep going. So one of the questions is, why is he a royal official? Because one of the questions is, who is the king that he is part of, his family? John kind of leaves that out. Even though we know that he's an important individual, but his son is sick. And he wants to come to Jesus because Jesus is the one, through the signs he has seen, that could heal his son. Which is interesting in and of itself. Because what miracles or signs has this man heard about?
Turning water to wine.
Yeah, turning water to wine. In the Gospel of John, now we could go over and read other Gospels and try to put it together. But here, the only sign that has been is changing water to wine. And so now he's going, if a guy can change water to wine, he can do this. He could make my son well. Okay? How does Jesus react to this royal official who's come with a sick son? Yeah. I'm glad you pointed that out, because what would you expect Jesus to do here? Be Jesus for a day. What would you expect Jesus to do when a guy comes with a sick child? Yeah, one, be sympathetic, empathetic, all those things.
Another guy came in a similar situation and Jesus said, "What great faith this man has."
Yeah.
He doesn't do that
No, he doesn't. In fact, what does he say? Yeah, unless you see signs and wonders, you won't believe. And the official said, "Sir, come down before my little boy dies." So, what does the guy expect Jesus to do? Come to his house, get to the location where the boy is dying. Now, that seems very reasonable.
If he's a healer.
If he is a healer, but if you change water to wine, you've got to be somewhat of. But then, what does he say from there? Before the boy dies, Jesus says, "Go, your son will live." The man believes the word that Jesus spoke to him and started on his way. What about that faith? I gotta say, I don't think I'm where this guy's at always. Because I mean, at least he could come to my house. Now we could imagine, because there are other stories, Brent, where Jesus doesn't go to houses. Why?
Well, the one guy said, you don't need to. He said,
Yeah.
I'm a ruler. I give my servants commands. You just give the command.
That's right. Also because they're Gentiles. Could be something going on here. We don't know. We're not sure what this royal official comes from, but Jesus calls him to go, and your boy will live. And he believes Jesus. Okay, let's go on down in the text. So he goes, and his slaves, his doulos, these are his slaves, meet him and told him that the child was alive. So he asked them what hour when he began to recover, and they said, "Yesterday at 1 in the afternoon, the fever left him." The father realized that it was the hour when Jesus had said to him, "Your son will live." So he himself believed, along with his whole household. Now, this was a second sign that Jesus did after coming from Judea to Galilee. Okay. So let me ask just a couple of questions because I really do want to get to the second story tonight. What do you notice about, one, the progression in this guy's life? And what's the point that we supposed to get here? Anybody got any ideas? And I'm willing to listen.
Go keep trying.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
It's one kind of thing.
But did he really have faith then, or was he just desperate? Clearly had faith when his son was saved.
Yeah, I think that's a good question too.
Well, there's a three-stage development.
There is a three-stage development of faith. In fact, a lot of history talks about it here, that this is a progression of faith in the faith story. But Debbie, I'm kind of with you. Does it matter? Because I think sometimes we start out with desperation in
I
our
mean, he
lives.
humbled it, right? He's a royal official.
Yeah.
Whatever. He comes to this migrant rabbi teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and it says,
And he begged
like,
him.
I don't know who you are.
And Jesus takes him on a journey that we're kind of surprised at.
And I even wonder if we're reading words when we would dismiss. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when we're looking at the text saying, be with Jesus, do what Jesus did. I think if Jesus was dismissive, that would have been the end.
Yeah.
But that's not, Jesus came to engage.
Yes, he did.
And so when he says,
Go. Yeah.
like, I mean, he said it with such love and compassion that, You know, he may have said to the crowd, to the Galileans, that it says they welcomed him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you guys are going to,
Yeah.
I want you to.
Good. I like that.
The other thing though, the Gentiles really don't, it'd be fair to say they didn't really have a preconceived idea of who Jesus was. I mean, from the Jewish standpoint, you know, they came with a preconceived idea of who they thought the Messiah was going to be. He just didn't always act the way they thought, so that's caused a lot of tension.
Yeah.
You see the Gentiles, you know, Corneliuses of the world and this guy, you know, they're very open to listening to what
I think this story in many ways is us. I think this story is us in our lives coming with needs, desperate needs. And we need to hear, and the question is, will we believe Jesus at his word? And sometimes, like a Samaritan woman, we can be very desperate, needing something in our world. I would argue this guy was at that kind of place. Because, folks, and if you haven't, well, I know a lot of our stories. And a lot of us have been at those desperate places where we need God to respond. And faith is a journey through this. And I agree with Debbie. I think this is Jesus is loving this man and giving him what he needs to make it through. And he trusts God. And God shows up and he heals his son. And he even gives it in a sign that makes a difference in that area. In fact, I think why, this is another question, because here he says this is the second sign that was done in Cana of Galilee. Now we know the first one, water to wine. This is the last time he numbers them. But here he goes, this is the second sign. What's this a sign of?
His power over nature.
Okay, good,
Physical thing.
good. What is God? Anything else? Go ahead, William.
It's a sign that he is who he says he is.
Yeah.
That's what the end of chapter 20 says.
Yes. He is God who's come in the flesh, who now is treating and touching people with this kind of grace. And he has the power to even heal when you're not there. Don't y'all believe that? That Jesus can do miracles even when he's not in the same room? If you don't, I don't know why you pray. I don't know why you go to the Father, because this Jesus compassionately has mercy at times. And on this day, he had mercy for this guy, and faith comes out in a big way. And yes, he was a royal official, but he did humble himself. Okay, that's the first story. Second story is one of the strangest stories in the New Testament. It's a story about a lame man who's been lame for 38 years, at least. And it's a story, in fact, some of the text even adds some sections to try and explain this story even more to us, because it's a strange story. So, Carl, or does someone else want to read? Okay. And I want to divide this reading into two parts. I want the first one to go to the first part of verse 9. And then from there, we'll go to verse 18. But let's just bite off a little at a time.
After this, there was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there's a pool called in Hebrew Bethzatha, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who'd been ill for 38 years. Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he'd been there a long time. He said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool where the water is stirred up, and while I'm making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk.
Okay. Now, let's talk about Jesus for just a second. First of all, Jesus goes to the festival of the Jews, and he went up to Jerusalem, which is a sign of going up to Zion, to the place of God, this where the temple is at. But he says he goes up, and now Jerusalem by the sheep gate, there was a pool. What goes on at this pool? Huh?
There's a lot of laying around.
A lot of laying around goes on at this pool. Who gathers at this pool?
But it does sound like something like Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Okay.
Where people go, where they claim.
Okay.
I've heard a lot of people.
Good. Yeah.
Really warm.
Yes.
Even here in Waco.
How's it?
The wells in Waco were without the water was thought to have healing.
Oh, and
So we had a bath.
Marlin
We had a
too.
bath here in Waco
Yes.
years ago.
Marlin had several. Mm-hmm. So, why? So they're gathering thinking this is going to be a place where they could get healing. In fact, some of your text, in fact, all of them probably have a footnote because verses are left out.
I doubt they're there to get healed.
Okay. Anyone else want to argue with that or agree or disagree?
Missing verse 4, after the word paralyzed, simply adds, and they waited for the moving of the waters. From time to time, an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters. And the first one into the pool after each such disturbance would be cured of whatever disease they had. That's the insertion.
Yes. Now, I'm not going to explain that insertion very well tonight. Even though there's nearly an implication of it in the text that something goes on in this water, and this man at least has some kind of understanding. Now, most reliable manuscripts do not have verse 4. Now, you guys, do you guys realize that there are added parts to the text in manuscripts? A lot of reasons for it. Sometimes I think it's corrections or small things, but sometimes I think it just, we want to explain something. It could have been something that was even written in the side and it gets merged into the text. And it becomes part of certain text. That's why we are so thankful that we have numbers of manuscripts and not just 2 or 3. Because biblical scholars, especially textual critics, spend hours looking and comparing and deciding what should be there. Well, this is a part of the text that most manuscripts of the New Testament do not have, but you can see where it'd get at it. We want to explain what happens here, that what the man seems to imply. Something happens in the water. Could explain why so many people are gathered there. But I think there is something else going here before we leave this part of the text that we need to hear. Because when we talk about how does Jesus treat people, I think it's important to know that one of the things he does is he goes to places where people are at. And he goes to places where even hurting people are at. Because who's gathered here on this day laid many ill, blind, lame, and paralyzed people. But on this day, he selects one guy who he noticed had been there for a long time, but he'd never gotten healed. In fact, how does this guy explain his predicament? Anybody? I can't get in fast enough. When the water is stirred, I can't get in because
Has anybody helped me?
nobody's there to help me. Now, my inquisitive mind goes, could you not just roll in or just lay? I don't know. But I know.
Here's one thing about this pool. This thing is 60 feet deep.
Yeah,
We're not talking about a kiddie pool, we're talking about a water reservoir
yeah.
that is deep. And if a paralyzed man goes in there with no one to help him out,
He'll drown.
he's gone.
In fact, that's one of the things, not just him, every one of these individuals. You got to hear, this is a story that's strange and we don't get it. But Jesus, so what does Jesus do? What we expect him to do. Stand up, take your mat, and walk. And once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. Now, is there any other questions you want to ask of this text before we go on?
What date is that?
What day did it? Yeah, now that's going to be the next part of the text. But is there any other questions you want to think or ask about this text? Yes.
Why do you only heal the one?
Oh, I was wondering when that one was, because that's a question I have. Because all those people are there, and he only heals.
He only healed one.
We don't. John only tells us about the one.
In the book of John, he only heals one.
Yeah, in the book of John. What'd you say?
But John even says many other things happened that weren't.
That is true. But with that text, William, I think it kind of says these are the stories that are important to get. These are the ones that will bring us to faith. This man, and by the way, he uses in this text, he said, at once the man was made well. This is a word for saved here. This I believe it is. He is made well. He is made complete. He is made whole. And he says, take up your mat and begin to walk. Yes, sir.
The other strange thing, I think, is the question. And to us, it doesn't make sense, but I think it does when you look at it overall. But because he asked, do you want to get well? Now, what kind of question is that to a man that's been laying down for 38 years, can't get up? Do you want to get well? Well, you would think that the automatic answer, well, of course I do. But when you stop and think about it, he's asking, if you get well, everything about your life, every aspect of your being is going to be changed. You can't just go begging anymore. You're going to have to work do something different. Everything is going to, do you want to change?
Hmm.
Not just walk, but be transformed.
Now that makes the question harder, doesn't it? Because here's a man for 38 years that's been begging, and now you're asking, do you want to get well? Good question. Okay, so now we turn to the second part of the story. Carl? I want you to go to verse 18. Let's go to 18.
And that day was a Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who'd been cured, "It's the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your mat." But he answered them, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Take up your mat and walk.'" They asked him, "Who's the man who said to you, 'Take it up and walk'?" Now the man who'd been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had disappeared in the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you have been made well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Therefore, the Jews started persecuting Jesus because he was doing such things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is still working, and I am also working." For this reason, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, but was also calling God his own Father, thereby making himself equal to God.
Okay. So let's look at this part of the text. Let's look at, obviously, we got to look at Jesus, but also we need to look at the man, and then the individuals who question the man. So let's start with the man himself. What do you notice about the man in this story?
Bit of a blabbermouth.
He is a little bit of a blabbermouth. I guess if you've been laying at the pool, you're gonna.
I think he's just very forthright. I mean, we're going to see this in John 8. But he's very forthright. It's like he's questioned about this. It's like, "Oh, he told me get up and walk."
Yeah, I think you're talking about John 9,
No,
which we're going to go to next week, by the way.
he told me to get up and walk. So I'm going to do what that guy says. 'Cause
Does he? Is he like the guy in John 9? You say no. No, I don't. I see a difference in the two.
Well, here, the development. I don't
Oh, yeah, the development,
I don't
because,
see the development the same, but at this moment, he's being challenged.
yeah.
And so he says, "No, he told me, the guy who healed me told me to get up."
But what he does differently here is he goes and finds out who it was who did the healing, and he goes and tells them that it was Jesus. What do you think about that? Does he just have a problem with gossip? What is his issue here? Okay, maybe so.
I just like my son on Christmas morning, trying to get him out to tell her what her Christmas is. He's gonna tell. He's really excited.
Okay.
He's already in trouble with the Pharisees for carrying his mat, so maybe he's trying to get back in good with them, giving them a piece of information that they wanted.
I think there must be something going on here than just he's excited. I think he is excited, but verse 14 implies something else. Because in verse 14 he says, what does Jesus find him and say? Stop sinning. Something worse is going to happen to you. Now, that's the last time we see him on the scene. One of the questions I think that this story asks us is, what do you do when Jesus makes you whole? What is next in your life? See, I think sometimes, if we're not careful, we can be transformed, we can be healed, we can be made well, but that desire to protect ourselves, or maybe that desire to be noticed by people, or maybe I think all kinds of things could be going on here with the man. And so Jesus says, watch out, stop sinning, or something worse could happen to you. Now, what about Jesus here? In this story, what do you notice about Jesus?
Didn't reveal who he was.
Well, no, he doesn't fully, even though the Jews seem to understand who he is. I mean,
They understand his claims.
yes. No, they don't fully understand this is God come in the flesh. Yes.
He's very direct. Yeah, he tells the truth.
Yeah. Explain, both of you. Be very direct, Mark.
But the man went to the temple to worship.
Jesus found him at the temple.
He found him at the temple. Could be.
It sounded like Jesus taught him out.
Yeah, I think this story, he does. Looks for the man. And I do think that says something that he finds him and he doesn't just celebrate or leading to the next level like he does in John 9. Now, you'll have to come back next week to find out some more about that story, but he doesn't fully think that, I'm going to come back to you both. I didn't forget.
Stop sinning.
Yeah.
He slips away.
Yeah. In fact, Jesus at the healing, he doesn't even tell him who he is.
Right.
The guy doesn't know that this is Jesus. But before long, he knows. Go ahead.
Well, okay. I'm gonna say something I actually disagree with, but I'm gonna say, John would argue that if you want to find God, if you want to see God, you don't go to the temple. You go to Jesus.
Yes.
And so even though the man is at the temple,
That's.
you would still have to find him.
Mm-hmm.
And we've already established in John 2, the temple is empty.
Right.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
it's not it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And so like this whole idea of when Jesus walks up to him and says, stop sinning or something worse may happen to you, it's just going back to this, which is kind of flip of John 9. They look at the blind man, they go, who sinned? That's next week. I'm not gonna steal your point. But on this one, nobody asked.
No.
Nobody asked if this is a sin problem. But Jesus is going up and he's telling them the truth and saying, hey, you can walk, but where are you going with those legs that God gave you?
Yes.
And then he immediately turns, and as soon as he knows that Jesus, his first move is to go take those healed legs and go find the teachers of the law or the Jewish leaders and to tell them that it was Jesus. So what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with this?
Okay.
What are we going to do with this?
I'll get there in a second.
I think the flip, the way I understood the class is doing what Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep saying, what about this guy?
Mm-hmm.
And what we see Jesus doing
Yes. Good.
is interacting with a Samaritan woman, not necessarily knowing he was going to go convert the whole.
Right.
Here he heals this lame man, not knowing he was going to go tattle.
Yes.
I mean, and so when you say, how do I be more like Jesus? Maybe it's not putting all of our
Mm-hmm.
but our notions and our presuppositions on how somebody will respond.
Right. Good.
We offer the invitation. Maybe their history own shame. But
Yes.
and I still invite
Good.
you know. And so I think as I look at these stories, you know, how do I spend time with
Going.
interacting with people in front of me,
That's right.
regardless of how you think
Hmm.
they're going to.
And then you are honest with them and say truth to them and have concern. See, the thing for me in this story is Jesus goes and finds him and is willing to warn him. I think that is a huge thing that he does. Even though for Jesus, you would think it'd just be easier to slip off into the night. But Jesus cares enough for this man that he lays everything on the line for this man. Because what starts happening because of this miracle? Verse 18. They're wanting to kill him. This isn't the right Passover. It's not going to happen then. But Jesus lays himself on the line for this man. And who is this man? A 38-year cripple that nobody notices. Who, yes, sir.
He also lays himself on the line for those who are opposed to him,
Yes,
the Pharisees.
very much so.
He cares enough about them to try to give them some truth, some greater understanding of who God is.
Yeah, that is true, even though we're pretty much out of time. But in John, later in John 5, he is really going to get tough on the Pharisees. I challenge you to go read the rest of this chapter tonight.
The individualized relationship with Jesus as well.
Yes.
Because he didn't heal the entire group in front of the pool, at least that we know of in this,
Mhm.
right? He didn't walk up and say, everybody's healed, because that would have been about him. Instead,
Yes.
we hear the story of the relationship, of him going and seeking out this man, and then seeking him out a second time and following up on that relationship,
Mhm.
continuing, versus just like a general blanket statement. He knows us. He knows our hearts.
Yes.
He comes and he will find us where we're
Yes.
at.
Now, I think when we come to John 9, so we're going to have to make a jump because we've got more text we need to go through. But when we come to John 9, we're especially going to see that. This is a Jesus. If we're going to be like Jesus, we're going to notice Samaritan women who have 5 husbands, and the one she has now is not her husband. Royal officials who are desperate. Lame individuals. A guy that comes at night. You see, and one of the things I would say, and this is the one I think we've got to think through as a church and as a people. And I know this takes a lot of history. How do we say we're supposed to reach out to people? What's our methodology usually? What do churches usually do? Yeah, door knocking could be. Yes. I'm going to tell you, I think it's
Send a mailing to your neighbors.
come to church. Come here.
Come to us.
Yeah, come to us and maybe you'll get it. I think Jesus goes out and notices and touches individual lives because that's who he is. And as the body of Christ, that's what we're to do. Because you see, we're going to come on lame people. And we're going to come on Samaritan women who are, what did you call, I love the way you called her. She was an outcast of outcasts. She was desperate. She had a story. You know people that you have a story with. What do you do for them? And I don't think it's just, well, he could do miracles and we can't always. I think it's because I think even in this last story, there was a bigger need that this man had than just having someone to healing. I think the Samaritan woman had a bigger need. I think the royal official had a bigger need. And that's what we're called, to follow our master. So,
Larry,
yes.
something I never thought about in this story. How unclean was that man? Think about how, I mean, Jews were in the pool daily in preparation to go to the temple.
Yeah.
Think about how unclean that man was.
You see, I think all these stories carry with it that idea. Because this is a Samaritan woman. And a royal official who seems to have power, but comes to Jesus. And I think all these stories, there is an uncleanness there. Maybe that's why John 2, what does Jesus use to turn water to wine? Jars for cleansing. Okay, guys. Questions, or any other questions or comments? Great.
Every time Jesus reached out to them,
Mm-hmm.
which builds a relationship. That we need to go out, but not that we can do miracles, but we can help to meet physical needs that someone has. That's the way to build a relationship. Then you speak the truth of Jesus to them, and you've already established that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Because you cared enough about them, and that's what Jesus always, he knows all of our individual needs. If there's someone's physical needs, and
Yeah.
automatically have their attention, then he would say, now you need to send more, and he would be truthful of, I took care of this physical need, but really what we're seeing is he took care of a greater need that they had.
Good.
They probably didn't even realize they had. They just were thinking, I have this physical need, and then all of a sudden, this person takes care of the physical need, and like, wait, now he's taking care of something that's greater.
Good.
The real need.
Mm-hmm. And I think Jesus, one other point I would make is I think if we're going to find people like this, we're going to have to get outside our normal places of being with people. We've talked about that some already. I think we've got to find places where the hurting potentially could come. Okay, guys. Huh? Well, we've already talked about that.
I'm saying it, no possible. Get up enough courage to
Okay. Well, maybe the Lord's calling you to do. I'll go with it. Huh? There we are, the crying shame. Okay, guys. Thank you for being here tonight. Let me pray over us. God, we just pray that you will put people into our world. And for some of us, the place we need to go is maybe the bar. Or maybe it's the place where people are very lonely. Or where someone is so isolated they have no one. Or maybe it's a religious leader who's seeking something and we open up a way for them to have honest talk. Maybe it's a lame man that needs something more than just physical healing. He needs someone to care enough to be honest. All these stories are real stories because we meet them in our world. We thank you that you have met us and the new creation is happening. We praise you. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys.